welcome. I'm glad you're here. I wish I could see you, but I can't, but I'm imagining you, and it fills my heart with joy. My name is Jonathan Foust. It's great to have you here for this guided meditation and Dharma talk, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here. As always, before we launch into the meditation, some acknowledgments. First is about how to get the most out of the whole Monday night offering. If you're drawn, there is mindful movement at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that's led by three wonderful teachers, by Rita and Anna and Lynn, and that'll take you to about 7:20 Eastern Standard Time. Gives you a little bit of a break, and then we launch into this meditation and talk. The talk usually starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard, goes till about 8:45. And afterward, if you'd like to tap into like-minded community and really good folks, you can join Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy for Mindful Dialogue. It's just a time to share about your practice, about the talk, that sort of thing. Great way to connect with people. Very, very grateful to everyone that helps to create this whole offering. And if you'd like to know more about those Zoom links for mindful movement and mindful dialogue, please do check out my Facebook page and my website. It's all there. Also, this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for our producers, for Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo. So grateful for all they do to get this webcast out there. The Insight Meditation Community of Washington offers a huge array of retreats, talks, classes, all kinds of stuff. So do check that out. It's www.imcw.org. Also, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington has been the host of Monday Night Meditation for many years, and perhaps shall be again. Thank you to all my friends there. Also, to let you know that there's a mailing list if you'd like to sign up. It gives you a monthly review of kind of what we covered. I share my photography in that as well. And let's see, there's the old standard thank you for your donations mention. This is all offered freely. It's all with the intention that no one who's interested will ever be denied access. So I offer it freely, and if you feel inspired at any time to support this through making a donation, please feel free. As I've said before, I think the greatest donation is to invest into your own practice, but I thank you for that. Mostly, I'm just tremendously grateful for the opportunity to share these practices with so many folks around the planet. Next big thing I'm offering is not until November, but I'll be offering a half-day retreat on this practice of rain, this relational meditation. So I'll be sharing more about that in the future. The exploration for tonight in the talk is kind of responding to a request on some of the parallels and differences on the life of the Buddha and the life of Christ. So I'm going to muck around with that a little bit. But the basic punchline is that they both point toward a sense of eternal truth, something that is true and real, that transcends your culture, your sexuality, your language, all of that. So we'll take a little time in our meditation to kind of open into that space that transcends language, transcends culture, that sense of timeless presence. So as you are ready, you might let your eyes close. And you might just take stock as to whether there's anything you can do that's going to support you in this practice. And one of them is just externally. Are you in a position where you won't be disturbed for a little while? Is your phone, your devices, your notifications, are they suspended for the next period of time? Internally, you might sense your posture. Is there any adjustment to your posture that would support you in cultivating relaxation and alertness? And you might inquire as well, is there anything about the attitude in your mind that might be helpful? I often like to tune into a sense of gratitude in the beginning of a meditation, and you might just take a moment to sense this opportunity to relax and to pay attention, to have this time to move from the outer world to the inner world. You might sense in any other ways in your life where you feel blessed right now. And you might just notice where you feel the breath on the inside. You may find it helpful for just maybe 2 minutes to lengthen and deepen your breath. Move into some willful breathing if you like. Breathing in slowly to the count of 4 or 5. Exhaling slowly to the count of 4 or 5. And as you continue, as you match the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath, notice the effect on the mind. Where is your mind right now? And you might just sense, as you are getting acclimated to this practice, just recalling that moment when you wake up with your mind far, far away, that's a really integral part of the practice. And can you meet that moment rather than judgment or self-criticism? Can you meet it with a sense of wonder? You just woke up out of the thought bubble. There's this moment of being here and now, relaxed and alert. And let that be an invitation to return to the here and now. And you might explore what it's like to soften inside, to explore more and more this sense of what is it like to deeply relax and be alert. Sensing the crown of the head, feel the forehead smooth. The muscles around the eyes. You might take some time to explore what it's like to soften all the muscles of your face and just track this movement to deep, deep, expressionless, relaxed presence. And can you feel or imagine a sense of relaxation spreading into the jaw and the lips, the inside of the mouth and the tongue? The back of the head, the base of the skull. And you might feel the weight of your arms and feel your arms like heavy drapes hanging from the shoulders as you sense what it's like to soften down the back of the neck, along the tops of the shoulders. And sensing from the inside down the length of the arms, down through the elbows, down through the wrists. And how intimately can you sense from the inside, the palms and fingers and thumbs and backs of the hands? Can you sense the space inside your throat? The space inside your lungs as your body naturally and effortlessly breathes. Sensing the diaphragm, the rib cage. And can you imagine or feel your awareness flooding into your lower back, flowing down into the buttocks, and feel or imagine the space between the hip joints and sensing the floor of the pelvis. And you might, as part of this inquiry into softening and receiving, bring your attention to your belly, perhaps like a few inches below your navel. And let your intention here be to soften and to feel and to track the subtlety of breath and the subtlety of any movement on the inside. As you feel the weight of your legs, you might sense simultaneously from the hip joints down through the knees. The knees down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. The soles of the feet and the heels. Is it possible to relax or soften even more and to sense simultaneously this quality of alertness and this quality of the observing, witnessing consciousness, relaxed and alert? Aware without any preferences. And in your own time, let your attention move to an anchor of your choosing, to the movement of the breath on the inside, or to the sounds around you, or to the feeling in the palms. Any anchor in the senses. And let this, for this next period of time, be your home base. And you might, just for a moment, just sense how intimately you can feel the next 3 breaths on the inside. How intimately can you feel the sound vibrations all around you, 360 degrees? How intimately can you sense inside the palms any sense of pulse or tingling or vibration? And whatever anchor you choose for this next period of time, let yourself begin again and again. Relaxing, sensing, receiving the moment as it's happening. At any time, you can refresh the practice. What might soften or relax? How intimately can you feel or experience your anchor on the inside right now? And can you sense this quality of the observer? Aware of all that's happening and neither grasping nor pushing away. Letting it be. And you might notice as you again and again relax, re-arrive, you might have a heightened sense of foreground and background. Your anchor in the foreground, and in the background, perhaps a heightened sense of change, or the flow, or the stream of your experience. And if it feels right for you, you might, from time to time, widen your attention, broaden your attention, opening to this field of flow. Again, sensing if you can let it be. When the mind gets active, when you notice the mind far away, you begin again, re-relax, soften, receive the moment. Take again this seat of the witness, and then widen and broaden, awake to what is changing. And you might again refresh your practice in these next 5 minutes or so. Again, sensing what could relax right now. Could you again relax the muscles of the face? Feel the inside of the mouth. You might again bring your attention to your belly, maybe an inch or two below your navel. Soften, relax, and feel. What is shifting inside here? And from the inside, can you feel the palms? The soles of the feet and the heels. And you might, again, bring your attention to your anchor. How intimately can you feel it from the inside? Perhaps over the next 3 breaths, softening and sensing more and more subtly inside. You might imagine or feel the sense of the witness. Relaxed, deeply relaxed, and alert, vibrantly alert. And you might explore, if you like, this movement from the practices of doing, of concentration, to explore more of a sense of being, of allowing, letting your anchor fall away. And as you sense the flow or the stream of your experience, is it possible to allow, to let be? Imagining for this next minute or so, there is nothing to do. There's nowhere to go, nothing to prove, but only to relax, to feel, to notice, and to allow all things to be as they are. Is there anything right now that could soften or relax or let go? Is there anything that could relax or soften or let go even more? releasing all technique. How much more could you relax? How much more can you sense this quality of non-judging, non-grasping mind? And you might now begin to gently lengthen and deepen your breath. Notice where you feel the breath on the inside. And you might very gently let your head drift a little bit to the left and to the right. Feel the movement from the inside. And then take some time for your transition. Feel free to move, to adjust your posture. If you like, you can reach your arms up overhead, let out any sounds. Welcome. So the Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus walk into a bar. And the bartender looks up and says, "Hey, is this some kind of joke?" A lot of jokes about religion. And to not get me into too much trouble, I'm not going to tell them. But I was recently asked, what are the parallels and the differences between the Buddha and Christ? And it got me thinking, and it got me reading. And of course, one of the places I looked to read was online, and oh my gosh, there are some opinions out there on this. And it's interesting how I really think that we tend to fall into two camps. There are those who are what we could call negative sorters, and those who look for commonality. If you put put a quarter, dime, and a nickel on the counter, one person will say, "Oh, it's money." They're looking for the commonality. And then someone else will look at it and say, "Well, that's a nickel, a dime, and a quarter." And they kind of see they look for the difference. So when I think about sharing some thoughts about the Buddha and Christ and their similarities and differences, I'm much more of a commonality type person. But when it comes to talking about this, what qualifies me to talk about this? And I thought about that, and the answer is not much. I'm not a scholar. I was raised a Quaker, which is sort of like the Zen Buddhist of the Christian wing. And I don't really feel a need to call myself a Buddhist or a Christian. It just doesn't feel, if I don't have to, why should I? I'm deeply informed by many, many different traditions, but I'm always touched by the story of Swami Satchidananda. Was one of the first teachers to come from the East. And he was asked about his opinion on something as a Hindu. And his response was, "I don't think I'm a Hindu. I think I'm an undu." And I like that. I feel like I'm someone who's trying to kind of undo my own prejudices and undo my own conditioning to wake up. So putting aside, monotheism versus a non-theistic approach, putting aside the difference between more of an emphasis on prayer versus an emphasis on meditation, and putting aside sort of like salvation through the acceptance of Jesus Christ as a Savior, versus a belief in Buddhism that belief isn't enough, that the seeker has to experience truth for themselves, through stilling the mind. There's so much in common. So what I'd like to talk about. First, I'd like to talk about this principle. It's actually a principle from the Vedas called Sanatan Dharma, which is the realization that there's an eternal truth that we all experience. And to talk a little bit about what is that core experience of awakening to reality. And then I'd like to look a little bit at some of the parallels between what the teachings of Christ and the teaching of Buddha say about inner guidance on your path. What are the parallels around outer guidance or outer support on the path? And then some thoughts about what does it mean to live in the world as guided by these different traditions. So in any tradition, we have this distinction between kind of form and essence. There's the form of a prayer, and then there's the essence of the experience of it. So there's a story which you may be familiar with. Anthony DeMello tells the story. So tip of the hat to him. When the bishop's ship stopped at a remote island for a day, he was determined to use his time as profitably as possible. He strolled along the seashore and he came across 3 fishermen mending their nets. In pidgin English, they explained to him that centuries before, they had been Christianized by missionaries. "We are Christians," they said, pointing proudly to each other. The bishop was impressed. "Do you know the Lord's Prayer?" They had never heard of the Lord's Prayer, and the bishop was shocked. And he asked them, he said, what do you say then when you pray? And they said, well, we lift our eyes to heaven, we pray, "We are 3, you are 3, have mercy on us." We are 3, you are 3, have mercy on us. And the bishop was appalled at the primitive and downright heretical nature of their prayer, so he spent the whole day teaching them the Lord's Prayer. The fishermen were not great learners, but they gave it everything they had, and before the bishop sailed away, he had the satisfaction of hearing them go through the whole formula without fault. Months later, the bishop's ship happened to pass by those islands again, and the bishop, as he paced the deck saying his evening prayers, recalled with pleasure the 3 men on that distant island who were now able to pray thanks to his patient efforts. While he was lost in thought, he happened to look up and noticed a spot of light in the east. The light kept approaching the ship, and as the bishop gazed in wonder, he saw 3 figures walking on the water. The captain stopped the boat, and everyone leaned over the rails to see this sight. When they were within speaking distance, the bishop recognized his 3 friends, the fishermen. "Bishop," they cried, we heard your boat go past the island. Hurry, we came to meet you." "What is it that you want?" the bishop asked, awestruck. They said, "Bishop, we are so sorry. We forgot the lovely prayer. We say, 'Our Father in heaven, holy be your name, your kingdom come,' and then we forget. Please tell us the prayer again." Well, the bishop felt humbled. And he said, "Go back to your homes, my friend. And each time you pray, say, 'We are 3, you are 3. Have mercy on us.'" I love that story because it speaks so beautifully to the transcendent experience that we all have, I believe, when we experience reality. In college, I was really struck by a beautiful book called Mysticism, written by Evelyn Underhill. And it was an analysis of what each mystic over the ages kind of experienced and said about their experience. And in essence, my takeaway was they all had the same experience. And they all described it according to their culture, to their gender, to their religion. And so we have this universal experience as humans. When you think about how we all feel loss, we all feel grief, we all are looking for happiness, that's in every culture. Every one of us is born into this life of wanting. Every one of us experiences some form of loss and grief and fear. So in my years in the ashram, we spent a lot of time kind of reflecting on what's referred to as Sanatan Dharma. And the translation of Sanatan Dharma is essentially eternal truth. And so what I noticed over the years as I was teaching, basically, teaching through the lens of yoga and meditation, that whenever people would have these transcendent moments of knowing, and this really blew my mind, that people later would share, now I understand what my rabbi was talking about. Right now I see what that scripture I was taught when I was a kid really means. And I love that sense of how when you nourish the root, what gets nourished is this deep, deep understanding of truths from the inside. It's one of the great things about reading books on spirituality is every now and then you'll read a description of something that totally resonates with your own inner knowing. So no matter what the tradition, we're all waking up. And when we wake up to what is true, inevitably there is this awakening of wisdom, seeing more clearly. And there is this awakening of the heart. There's an awakening of compassion, empathy, kindness. So the experience of truth, the essence of truth, is not confined to one doorway. And I know there are people who would definitely argue with that, saying, no, there's only one doorway. But I'd like to talk a little bit, again, here on the commonality. What do these traditions have to say that are in sync? And I love a beautiful description by Thich Nhat Hanh, such a powerful teacher. He talks about how religions are like gardens. They're expressions of the divine in many, many different forms. So we have to celebrate the diversity. And all these different flowering plants are all an expression of the source. And they're all pointing us back toward the source. So when in the Christian tradition we hear the words, "Be still and know that I am God," what does that mean? And in fact, if you like, you can close your eyes just for a moment. And just allow those words just to resonate in your consciousness and in your heart. Be still and know that I am God. My sense is that when that was said, and again, I always use the word allegedly, because for both Christ and Buddha, things were not written down until much, much later. But that be still and know requires that we be still. It takes us from the mind, from the conceptual mind, into an inner experiential place of knowing. And what does knowing mean? We can say knowing is mindfulness. Knowing is cognizing. Knowing is that deep recognition. To know that you are God, to know that you are source. Potent stuff. And I'll share a little bit about a really beautiful sort of Christian approach to meditation. So in the Buddhist tradition, to be still and know points toward cultivating awareness, turning inward through vipassana. You could also say to be still and know that I am God has a contemplative quality to it. But then what's the result of that knowing? And again, here we have this beautiful fusion. The result of knowing is love and acceptance and understanding. It's about wisdom and compassion. It's about finding joy. It's about overcoming suffering. And both traditions speak about knowing what you want, knowing what deep in your heart calls you, and then tempering your desires to focus on that. So in order to do that, both traditions speak about morality. They speak about ethics. In the Buddhist tradition, wherever you go, if you go on a formal retreat, you will take what are called the precepts. These are the guidelines for your practice. They are designed to help you focus, to not stray. So you undertake the training to refrain from harming others, from taking what is not freely given, to refrain from causing any sexual harm, to refrain from false speech, to refrain from clouding the mind through substances that obscure clear seeing. So these are restraints designed to sort of temper the senses, to kind of calm the mind and give you access to that inner knowing, that to give you access to what it means to be still. And of course, we have the ethics that are laid out in the Christian tradition. Thou shalt not have strange gods before me. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. Remember to keep holy the Lord's day. To honor your father and mother. To not kill. To not commit adultery. To not steal. To not bear false witness against your neighbor. To not covet your neighbor's wife. To not covet your neighbor's goods. There's a true synthesis here. And of course, in the Vedic tradition, there are the yamas and niyamas, also 10. And they're about restraining, but also about cultivating. Slightly different language around ethics. So to live this noble life, you refrain from lying. You refrain from stealing. You refrain from heedless indulgence in the senses. To refrain from hoarding. And then the 5 elements you cultivate cleanliness and purity of body and mind. You cultivate contentment. You cultivate discipline and focus. To study the nature of the self and to cultivate your capacity to surrender to a higher power. So part of this inner guidance is very clear in both traditions around refraining from what would harm you and harm others, to refrain from whatever would get in the way of being still and knowing who you truly are. Another quality of inner discipline from both traditions is cultivating faith. Buddhism speaks of the refuges of taking refuge in awareness itself. To take refuge in what is absolutely true. And to take refuge in love. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that can be faith in the classic expression of the Buddha himself. It can be taking refuge in a tradition. It can be taking refuge in your community. But the essence, I think, is wakefulness, truth, and love. Christianity speaks of cultivating faith, of taking refuge in the compassion of Christ. There are many, many examples in the Bible of the power of faith. And so faith plays out in many ways. And both traditions actually speak about the difference between kind of simple childlike faith and verified faith. Part of magical thinking or childlike faith is like, whatever you tell me, I'll believe it. And something's going to come if I just believe this. But a mature faith is a verified faith. where you take something on, you apply yourself, and then you really investigate, is this true? So I just want to share this. This is from Sri Nisargadatta. And this is about the application of faith. And if you're not familiar with Sri Nisargadatta, he's an extraordinary non-dual teacher. And his teachings they're incredibly powerful. Sometimes they're very hard to grasp because he really speaks about residing beyond the non-conceptual mind. But part of the faith, just as different traditions have faith in the teacher, whether it be Christ or whether it be a guru of some kind, that he had a teacher. Here's what he said. When I met my teacher, he told me this: you are not what you take yourself to be. Find out what you are. Watch the sense of I am and find your real self. I obeyed him because I trusted him. I did as he told me. All my spare time I would spend looking at myself in silence. And what a difference it made, and how soon. My teacher told me to hold on to the sense of I am tenaciously and not to swerve from it even for a moment. I did my best to follow his advice, and in a comparatively short time, I realized within myself the truth of his teaching. All I did was to remember his teaching, his faith, his face, his words, constantly. This brought an end to the mind. In the stillness of the mind, I saw myself as I am, unbound. I simply followed my teacher's instruction, which was to focus the mind on pure being I am and stay in it. I used to sit for hours with nothing but I am in my mind. And soon peace and joy and a deep all-embracing love became my normal state. In it all disappeared myself, my teacher, the life I lived, the world around me. Only peace remained and unfathomable silence. Faith has a powerful, powerful way of supporting us in our practice. For Sri Nisargadatta, that synopsis probably didn't give maybe due nature to the challenge of coming back again and again and again to his practice, to dealing with everything getting in the way of what he was cultivating. But his faith in his teacher, the love that he felt for his teacher, the love that he trusted, supported him. And in that same way, Christ spoke beautifully about the power of faith, the faith of a mustard seed. So in terms of the inner guidance, if you follow both traditions, they say, live a life dedicated to your highest goals. Live ethically. Manage your time, manage your energy, manage your attention so that you can stay focused and move toward what calls you. And cultivate faith in your path. Your faith will support you in sometimes magical ways. So that's just some of the inner teachings. But of course, we don't live in caves. we live in communities. And what about life together in community? What do these teachings have to say? I remember very clearly for myself. And first of all, just to back up and say, one of the things that I have really found, because both Christ and Buddha talked a lot through parables. They talked a lot through stories. And one of the things I found is that a true teaching, or let's say a powerful teaching, can be grasped by a child but can also point toward true liberation and freedom. And I can't remember how old I was, but it was a very, very clear memory for myself when I must have been 7, 8, 9, when I came across the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I remember it being an absolute revelation. And I just thought, in my 8 or 9-year-old mind, this is it. This is the answer. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. My God. And I tried it. And I found out it wasn't reciprocal. I found that in my family system, my intention, the immediate feedback was not supportive. And it really points toward how hard it is to practice if there are not others who are also practicing. And it points toward the importance of community. And both traditions, and when you look back through the thousands of years, you'll see that community plays a very, very important part around waking up. And you know what it's like when you're on a team or you're focused on something together. You know, when you're doing something together, or you're having a conversation with just one other person and you're just synced up. It's that amazing feeling. And again, the classic phrase, when 2 or more are gathered in my name. When 2 people or more are focused on something, that shared experience has a power, it has a potency. And so there's this interesting focus in both traditions on focusing on inner peace, but also focusing on outer peace. When I was in high school, I got to check out a bunch of abbeys and monasteries in Great Britain, and I was stunned at how beautiful they were. Of course, they were in ruins, but at their time, they were kind of the spine of the spirituality of that culture, to create a safe sanctuary for people to practice together. And when you look all through Asia, you see these institutions of all kinds of forms of practice, whether it be in the jungles or whether it be in the Himalayas. People call together to practice. And now there's an upside to that. The upside is that you have this safe and sacred space where you can focus on what's most important. And the community is designed around waking up. The shadow side of that is it's also a place where you can get comfy. It's a place where you can sort of fall asleep because you're not necessarily being challenged, which is certainly a part of many communities that I'm aware of. You know, having lived in a intentional spiritual community for a good while, for a long time, I would meet so many people who would fantasize about moving in, you know, imagining this idyllic setting where everyone lives in harmony, where everyone is working toward the same goals. And there's an interesting paradox here, because what I've found is that a lot of people are drawn into community, at least to the monastic type community. They're quirky. It's an unusual calling to set down all your worldly desires to turn inward. You know, that monastic calling. And the interesting thing is that when you're in community, and the community really embraces transformation and awakening, if you're practicing, your intention is to keep letting go of what is not truly you. And that can be a very cathartic and a very purgative practice. And of course, all of that spills over into our relationships. So quite often in spiritual communities, there's jealousy, there's projections. We come in with our idealism, and when things don't go the way we want, all of our unhealed family system stuff comes up. I see it as well in a lot of nonprofits. A tremendous amount of idealism, and then bumping up against each other brings out kind of the worst of our conditioning. I was raised a Quaker, and whenever there was big conflict in the meeting, there was this this cry of, let's form a committee. So conflict in community is a natural part of the process. And again, in both traditions, with this high ideal of coming together to support each other and waking up, people trigger each other a lot. And at least in my years of living in the ashram, people would generate a lot of conflict. But we also got better and better at cleaning it up. And there was something very powerful about that, of developing really good communication skills. One of the advantages of being with people who are kind of willing to kind of work things through. So in the Buddha's day, he created sanghas, he created community for people to practice together. And a lot of people who were drawn to these communities were uncooked. They were kind of untrained, uncooked. They had a lot of idealism, and a huge amounts of conflicts came up. So if you look at a lot of the past history, there are all these guidelines for living in a monastic community. There's a list of what you can talk about, what you can't talk about. You could talk about your practice, your insights, the challenges you're having in your practice, how inspired you are by the practice, the teachings that mean a lot to you. What you can't talk about is pretty much everything else. You could not talk about someone else unless they were fully present. No gossip, no politics, no philosophical debates that don't add to your practice. In that same way, when we look at the formation of community and kind of in the name of the Christian tradition, again, we're back to this sense of the garden, all these different expressions. But part of those expressions were incredible rifts. In 1054 was kind of the Great Schism. It was the breaking up of the Western Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Part of it was political, but part of it was, and again, my understanding may be flawed here, but is it okay or not okay to use unleavened bread for communion? That created a pretty big rift. Did church leaders have to be celibate or not? Again, all part of the rift. So this great breaking apart. And then in 1517, Martin Luther protested against some of the practices and the priorities of the Roman Catholic Church. And then there's this whole Reformation that came up through the conflict within community. From what I can tell, as I've just reflected on the formation of different communities, that quite often there's a powerful, charismatic teacher who has a very genuine opening and insights and real power, and then that teacher attracts very sincere followers. And then from there's a development, the creation of an institution. And then from there, you have a basic schism that occurs. You have the Orthodox, those who say we need to follow precisely these teachings to preserve their integrity. And then you have the Reformed, who say we need to adapt this. We need to make it relevant. We need to shift this in a way so it's available for other people to understand in a different age. And I think the sense of conflict is inherently good. As the teacher Stephen Cope, many years, he talked about them as creative tension arcs. To have that arc between preserving the core essential teachings and then finding a way to adapt them that makes it relevant for people. And it really is this kind of the essence about what it means to wake up, what it means to wake up together. And I think we all have this kind of inherent sense of wanting to be more awake. We have this inherent sense of knowing what it's like when we're aligned with other people who want what we want. Or we can draw on what we used to say in the ashram, how company is stronger than willpower. But also knowing that what we want is what everyone wants. And this points toward kind of the transcendence of what we call the separate self, or what we call the transcendence into Christ consciousness. In Zen, there's a saying of how life moves from one, like a sense of pure oneness and unity. It splits into two, and then that splits into 10,000. So we have all these different expressions that are all part of the garden. So both traditions, the teachings of Christ, the teachings of Buddha, also point toward another thing, which is about moving from conceptual to skillful means that you apply every day. And I'd like to share with you a meditation technique as we close here that was developed by Father Thomas Keating. And it's this beautiful synthesis of these traditions. Father Thomas Keating tells the story of how in his parish, he was asked if a meditation group could use a room in the basement. So he said yes. After a fashion, he noticed that there were more people in the meditation session than there were actually attending his services. He thought, well, maybe I better check this out. So he went through the training, and the training was in mantra meditation. And he noticed for himself a tremendous effect. He noticed that there was a calming, that there was a stilling that was quite profound. Now, this particular tradition kind of came from, it was a Vedic tradition, kind of a Hindu tradition. So he had the capacity to kind of suspend his concepts and experience kind of the fruit of the practice. It was very transformative. But he wanted to share it, like many people. When you experience something that transforms you, you want to share it. And so he adapted, and he created what's called Christian contemplative prayer. And in essence, what you do is you take a phrase that's meaningful for you. And it might be a word from Scripture. It might be, be still and know, or be still and know that I am God. And what you do is that becomes your anchor. And so it's not so much the breath, it's not sound, it's not feeling, it's the repetition of that inner phrase. And you come back to that phrase and just very, very gently allow that to be what draws you into the here and now. So I'd like to offer just a little taste. We have just a few minutes for this. If you like, you might close your eyes. And you might think of a phrase that's meaningful for you. And you might either use the phrase, be still and know, or be still and know that I am God. And as you close your eyes, just take 3 slow breaths. And imagine that phrase, whatever you land on here, imagine that you're just whispering it very, very softly. And now imagine you can internalize that phrase. And sense what it's like just to keep this phrase in the foreground. When the mind wanders, and the mind will, just sort of sense if you can let go of that thought and come back to this very gentle awareness of the phrase and let it have its own space. It might be soft, it might be fast, it might be slow. We'll take the next minute or so. Again, when your mind wanders away, come back to the phrase. Hold it very, very lightly and relax. And now, if you would, just release the technique and just take a moment to sense what kind of imprint do you feel? If you'd like, you can deepen the breath. If you'd like, you can open your eyes. Both Buddha and Christ talked about being awake in the world. And they spoke of prayer or meditation or chanting as part of your life. To keep God in your heart, to keep wakefulness in your heart. So it's interesting to kind of look at the parallels that both teachers had disciples. They taught through very simple parables and stories. That they actually were creating social reform. They were both reacting to the ritualized forms of religion that had no spiritual meaning. Either the criticizing of money lenders or criticizing the caste system. They were both egalitarian. They both said this is not limited to just a small number of people. They created ethical guidelines that would support compassion and being in relationship with each other. They both talked about the power of love. When the Buddha said hatred cannot be overcome by hatred. When Christ said, love your enemy. They both encouraged their followers to take steps to improve themselves. They both called on devotion and faith. They both called on being charitable to the poor. They both provided a monastic approach for those who wanted to be exclusive in their practice or practice more in depth, but also a lay approach for those living in the world. They both aspired to spiritual communion. They both spoke of transcending the material world, that happiness came from raising consciousness. And they both have an element of focusing on divine consciousness. So if Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus walked into a bar, I remember my guru talking of how they would have nothing but resonant love, that they would all be residing in a space or a consciousness that is utterly equal among them. And the challenge, the invitation we have, is to explore how all these different expressions truly are like a flowering garden. Each in their own individual expression, and each one fueled by this unified field that we're sharing. So whatever practice, whatever tradition that you're a part of, may it serve to awaken the heart and mind and be a benefit to all. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Many, many blessings in your practice. I wish you well. Until we meet again.